let me pick up where I left off last time. I was at the Sam's Club with 5 trailers in the 5 dock spaces. Finally, when they let me in, I walked inside and greeted them. And I told them that I had a trailer and I needed to drop off 1 pallet. 1. And they were like, okay, but we need all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, I get it, but I need to get this in there. So I need you to tell me what I can move out. What is the least priority right now that I can move out and that way I can get this 1 pallet out of the way. You got to have a dock space. Otherwise, no one's going to be able to get in there. And then they kind of look at each other and they start talking to each other. And then like, there's a water truck coming at about 8. So yeah, we do need to have a dock space open up. And I'm like, it's not for the 1 pallet of meat and produce. And I'm sure that there's going to be more meat and produce right behind it. It's not that, it's the water truck. Anyway, that frustrated me, but they finally said, okay, you can pull out this one. And so I had him sign the form for it. And then she says, but we don't have a lock for this trailer. So do us a favor, back it over there as close as you can to these upright yellow pillar things that are made of concrete. She says, see if you can position the trailer so that way it backs up between the two. That way the doors don't open, because it's jammed up against them. I'm like, I'll do my best. So I pulled out that ATS trailer and I backed it up over there. It's very difficult to close the gates on those things, or at least the one that I was moving. And also the bottom of the gate was here, the pull out doors. The bottom of it was there, and the pillars were there. So they literally would open right over top of them. But what I realized is that the locking mechanism that comes over there was about this big. So you have to twist it in order to swing the thing out. So on both sides. So what I did is I positioned it so that way the 2 doors were even with the piece of concrete. So that way I backed the trailer all the way up to the point where it was almost touching. It was like 2 inches away. And so that way someone would have to reach in there and have like a mega amount of hand strength and force it somehow out and move the trailer about 1 inch in order to get the thing up and out of there. So it wasn't going to happen. And they were appreciative. I pulled in the dock, unloaded my 1 pallet, and I was out of there. All in all, it was at 5 a.m. Because when I got in there, it took them so long to let me in. Then they had to futz around and figure out which trailer. And then by the time I positioned it and got it and put mine in there, and then they were ready to unload me, it was 5. So I got back to the DC and got out of there. Anyway, that was it for me. Now, before I get into this week, I had talked about applying for other jobs. Here's how that's been going. I spent like 2 or 3 days hitting it hard, and I had a lot of people interested, and I had a bunch of very interesting offers. Many of them were that paid decently were OTR again. Now, I did OTR with Schneider, as you know if you've been watching the channel, and I like seeing America. But what I was not happy about is that the resets are always on the road. And it's like the way I explained it to the recruiter that I talked to this week, who is trying to help me find a placement. She said, well, yeah, I mean, but you'll be out on the road and you'll be making, and she basically said you'd be making like, I think she said $1,800 on average on a week. And I said, yeah, and that's all well and good, but she's like, you'd be out for 2 weeks and then home for 5 days. And I said, so that wouldn't be good at all. And she said, why? I said, because I'm home for 5 days. That's almost an entire pay cycle again. So that means I reset at home. I spend all the extra time at home. But I said, the problem with that is if you're out just OTR, like when I was with Schneider, I would work 5, 6, sometimes 7 days in a row, depending on the schedule. Some days I would be picking up and dropping off, and I was at the mercy of my schedule. So I would only work like 8 or 9 hours. And then the next day I would have a drop off and a pickup, and then I would shut down early. And then might drive the next 5 days and then shut down when I was out of time. And that might be the 7 days. But, I would reset on the road. The days that I'm not working, I'm not paid for. Now, when I'm working here at Martin, it's different because I'm resetting at my house over the weekend. So I'm home weekly. But when I'm at home, I have 2 days off or 3 days off, depending on my schedule. And my pay is based on those 5 days out. It's only based on those 5 days out. It's not based on what days do I have that are out, and then I go home and I have no pay. Like when I was out with Schneider, technically I was out for 3 weeks and home for 4 days. This other job would have been out for 2 weeks and home for 5 days. Why do I want to do that? Get $1,800 minimum for a couple of weeks, and that's it. And that would be probably on par with what it was. But then if I'm home for 5 days, full 5 days, then it would screw me up because I wouldn't get paid for that. So basically you take $3,600 and you maybe multiply that by maybe that $1,800. You might multiply that by like 2.6, 2.65, something like that, 2.7. And that would get you around maybe what is it? $5,000, something like that for 3 weeks. When quite often, and that would be before taxes. So, I mean, quite often with Schneider, I was making, 15, 16, 1,700 a week if I could nail those long hauls, if I could hit it really hard and time things so that way I was dropping off first thing in the morning, getting a load and running those loads over a weekend. And so that way, because Schneider did not give out pods loads, pods did not assign loads on the weekend. So I would either reset on the weekend or I would drive over the weekend, and then I would try to schedule it so that way I would have a pre-assignment when I would get to a place on Tuesday or Monday, however I could. But I was looking at this thinking, and that actually that 5,000 is wrong, because it would be $1,800 per week, and then that would be 2 weeks for $3,600, and then I would have 2 of the 7 days. So that might be a total of 4,000, as opposed to 15 to 17, which is what I was making for Schneider per week. And even the weeks that I would go home, I would only be home for 2 days. So on an average week, I would probably average around 14, 15. So that would be making more than this OTR position that would send me home every 2 weeks. And so I explained it to the person. I said, look, my home time, I would have to take my home time. I would want to, because you can't just be away from your family forever if you have a family. And I said, if I'm home on the weekends, I can go see them. If I'm not home on the weekends, then I'm not going to be paid when I go home and want to spend time with my family for a reset. You're not paid for that, regardless. There was one company, and that was Great Plains Transport out of North Dakota. They had made a pitch, but the thing, and they said, here's what we have to offer, and they sent me a link to it, and it was guaranteed. I think it was $72,000 a year or something like that, and it was salary, which is cool because it pays you when you're home. But a salary position like that, when you do the math on what it was $1,400 a week. That's not anything I'm interested in doing. It sounded great. It sounded like a good mom and pop company. It sounded like they were on the ball and pretty organized and that kind of stuff. But for a salary position where you can, if you work your tail off or no matter what, I mean, if you're stuck in traffic, if you're stuck in ice or whatever, then, which might happen in North Dakota, I can imagine that if you were okay with that. But no, I'd rather actually work my tail off and make more. So there was another position, the top contender, which was actually driving a manual transmission. Their ad said they wanted 1 year of experience, but when I got them on the phone, I finally got the recruiter on the phone, and she said, yeah, how much experience do you have? I said 13 months. She says, yeah, call us back when you have 18. Well, your ad said 12. She said, yeah, that shouldn't have been a thing. So anyway, I talked to, but the other recruiter I spoke to, she made a couple of pretty decent offers, but there were none of the weekend resets. It was always resetting on the road. And even though they paid more, they weren't resetting on the road, and they had more, they had less home time with a longer amount of home time duration. So it's like, I would just rather have weekly home time and have my resets be at home. That way I could spend my time with my family and then hit it hard for the week, and then spend time with my family, hit it hard for the week. That's the way I'd rather do it. That's the way it would work best for me. So that's what I'm interested in. I told her, and she says, yeah, we don't have anything like that, but in a couple of weeks, she's going to get some new contracts. So she said, can I keep you in mind? I said, please do. Anyway, in the meantime, at Martin, I am moving back into weekends. I had been transitioning out because, you'd work 5 days and then you'd be off 2, work 5 days, off 3 with the slip seat thing. So if I started, for example, if I started on Friday night, then my weekends would be all of Saturday morning, and then I'd go back to work Saturday night, and then I'd get off Sunday morning, and then I'd start back work Sunday night. And that's great because I'd get basically 4 half days, the Saturday morning, Saturday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night. I'd get those miles. But then what happens is you transition out of it. So you would end up going where you start Sunday night and you finish Friday morning. And so you only get like one of those little halves. And then by the time you start again, you would start Monday night and finish Saturday morning. So again, only a 1.5 day of weekend miles. So that transitioning you out of that really takes a hit on your paycheck. So that's not good. Right now though, this last week, I started on Tuesday and finished on Sunday. No. Yes. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and it finished Sunday morning. That's right. Okay. So I'm starting to move back in. Now I have 3 of those half days of 4. I was not getting Sunday night, but I'm now that I'm going back. I mean, this previous week that I did, I started at that schedule. I basically finished my day on Saturday morning. And then I went back to work the week I'm about to tell you about, and I finished on Sunday morning. That's the way it is. So I'm starting work again. This next cycle, I'm starting on a Tuesday night. And so I will finish again on Sunday morning, and then I'll be transitioning. I'll be taking my 3 days home, and then I'll be transitioning straight into having my 4 half days. So that'll be good. Slowly starting to get it. So, and this is going to be the way it is for about the next, 3 months, 2.5 months, something like that. So the fire for leaving Martin for right now is gone. When I start to transition out of weekends again, I'm going to be like, again, and wanting to, probably find something again. And it will be cold at that point. So hopefully the way that the recruiter that I was speaking to told me, she said that a lot of time what happens is drivers that like to drive overnight, they prefer to drive when it's, when the sky starts to go black in the 9 o'clock hour, and it starts to get light again in the late 5 o'clock hour, which is in the summer. But as soon as we transition into fall and it goes into 7 to 7, then that's when people are less interested in doing it because it's like the full night. So that's when they like to transition out at night. So she said, yeah, usually in late August, early September is when the night positions really start to get open again. Now, night positions are more difficult for my sleep schedule with my girls because I have a family. And when I get off work, I like to go see them. So I will finish working a night of 12 hours, 14, whatever it happens to be. And I will go home, maybe nap for an hour and a half. and then I will go to spend the day with them, and I will spend all day with them, 12 plus hours. Once they go to bed, I will go to sleep fine that night, no problem. And then if it happens to be my 3 nights off, I will sleep again a really nice night. And then the next night I will stay there until they go to bed. Then I drive home. I stay up all night, taking only a brief nap for about an hour and a half in order to reverse my sleep schedule. Then I stay up until it's time to go to bed. So, and that's usually about 9 a.m. because I'm now waking up about 4:30 and trying to get and starting my day around 6. Anyway, that's the toughest part of it, is the reversing the sleep schedule back and forth for only like 2-3 days off, something like that. Anyway, so let me tell you about this week. On Monday, I was assigned a 6-stop job that was ready to go at 4 p.m. So I went in early, waking up at 3:30. Now, that was good. 6 stops is good. The stop pay, $15 per stop. So that's going to be $90 in stops alone. And it was something like 350 miles, I think, if memory serves. I don't remember what it was exactly, but it was somewhere around there. So that was going to be pretty good. 350 miles is normally about what it is if I get a 250 mile run, 275 mile run, and then one of the other, noise ordinance loads or something like that. The interesting thing was none of the trucks in my group were available. So they put me in a Peterbilt. First time I've driven a Peterbilt since I was in CDL school. But this Peterbilt had air tank issues, just like that truck was previously, like a couple weeks ago, whatever that was. But this one was actually holding air. It just wasn't holding it great. So I could, if I touched the brakes, if I took my foot off the brake and just coasted, in the yard or something like that at 4 miles per hour, the tanks would go up to about 102 PSI and would just hang there. If I was driving down the road, accelerating at 55, 60 miles an hour and the revs were up high, then it would slowly sometimes get up to around 125, which is normal when the governor would cut off. What was not happening very well is when I put on the brakes, even very gently, the pressure would drop to like 80, 70%, or 70 PSI. And I'm like, yikes, because a couple of times the alarm went on. And you may say, why didn't you tell them and get another truck? Because when I picked it up and turned it on and cranked it up, I was doing my Omnitrax work while it was filling up the air tanks. And when I was bobtail and I looked down at it, it was at 125 PSI. As soon as I started to drive, I connected it up and connected up the trailer, and the air tanks were still at 125 PSI. So I jumped out of it. I drove the trailer over to pick up to get fuel, and I leave the truck idling. So it idled and was able to build up the air tanks. And so when I got back in there and about to go to the gates, I looked at it, it was 125 PSI. And I was like, okay. So as soon as I pull up to the gate, I'm looking at it. I'm like, why did it drop down to about 105? Well, it'll build back up. It's been at 125 PSI. No problem. So I hit the road. I went out of the gate. If you leave the gates, they want you to not come back until the trailers are empty, unless there's a problem and it's got approval. So once I hit the road, I'm looking at it. I'm like, the air tanks aren't going higher than about 102 PSI. So I wasn't happy about that. But I realized that unless it was an actual problem, like if I was putting on the brake and the pressure wasn't going back up, then there would be a problem. But I could just be very gentle on the brakes and it would be fine. And it would build back up. It was the only time it wasn't is when I came to a stop and got out and looked, which they want you to do. I think I told you, they want you to do that every single time you pull up. It's new Walmart policy. They want you to send in a free-form message that says goal right as you jump out of the truck and you check it out. Then you get back in, because if you don't and you hit something, Walmart reserves the right to fire you because you didn't look. You didn't goal. But if you type in that message and they look at the camera and say, okay, you did get out and look, then they're going to say, okay. And They might still fire you, but at least you adhere to the policy. So this is probably one of those things that if somebody is an idiot and drives into something or crashes, something like that, then this is a way that they have of you didn't adhere to the company policy, you didn't goal, so you're fired. I guess that's what it is. Anyway, so my 6 stops were Cumming, Dawsonville, East Ellijay, Calhoun, Tryon, and Dunwoody. Okay, so let's talk about this one. All the stops went fast because they were all around 4 pallet positions, except for 2 loads that were 6 and 7. So it wasn't bad at all. The slowest was Calhoun, and I had to run around after waiting 15 minutes. I mean, there was a guy at the door that said, yeah, manager's coming. And I knocked on the door, and then I'd wait a little while, and then I'd ring the doorbell. And I'm like, okay, I've been waiting out here a few minutes. Yeah, he's right around the corner. I'm like, okay, so I'd wait. And then after a while, after waiting 15 minutes, he kept telling me, oh yeah, he's coming. I was like, no, I'm just going to run around. Anyway, so anyway, that was that. Each of the stops, when I got out and looked, the air tanks took like 2 minutes to fill up, because as soon as I'd pull the trailer brakes, and engage them, then it drains the air tanks a little bit. So it ends up, when I got out and look, and then I get back in there and I push them engaged, it would always drop down to 60, and the alarm would go on. So I'd be sitting there like, come on. So it would be one of those things where the tanks would build back up. It was just annoying. I did not see a need. If there was an issue where I didn't feel like it was safe, or if I put on the brakes and they just dropped down and started alarming every single time, that'd be different. But engaging the trailer and the tractor brakes was the only thing that was causing the alarm. But that's from a stop position, and it would build back up. And then when I engage it and push it in there and start creeping backwards, the alarm would go off briefly, but then it would go back on, because it would stop and it would allow me to drive. So I would basically shift into reverse and then engage the brakes or disengage the brakes, and then it would drop down to about 65, 60 psi, and it would hold there for a second while it built back up the pressure just for a moment, and then I was going. So it was a bit annoying, but it still happened. Anyway, that was all the stops basically that night. Now the Dunwoody entrance, this was fun. The Dunwoody entrance was not labeled with a truck entrance, and it's a neighborhood market. And it happens to be at the end of a road that a girlfriend that I dated for 5 years, she lived like, a tenth of a mile away from there. So I was very familiar with that area, because we went there, sometimes to there was a grocery store back in the day, and now it's been repurposed as the neighborhood market. But it wasn't labeled for trucks. And 30 years ago when I dated her, I wasn't paying any attention to where truck entrances were. Wasn't even like barely over a year ago. So I pull in what seems like it's the entrance, but as soon as I pull in there, I realize that the next to the building, there was a fence there. I'm like, I can't go this way. And now I'm in a parking lot I can't turn around in, because there's like parking spaces, but they have like those little bumps, that you can't drive over. So I was like, all right, great. So luckily it was like 2:30 in the morning. So I backed back up onto the road, Winter's Chapel, and there was nobody around, not one person at all. So I backed up onto the road and then back down the street about another 150 feet, and then pulled in another place, and then it was fine. But anyway, so nobody was out there. I think it was like 2:45 by the time the air tanks had built back up and let me go into reverse and whatever. So it wasn't a big deal. It's a 24-hour store, even though it was a neighborhood market. I got back to the DC about 4:45 a.m. and called the office about the air tanks. And they asked me if I would take the truck to Tucker. They said, do you have time? I said, sure. So since I didn't have a second load for the night, because I didn't have the hours, I did have time to take it to Tucker. And then they said they would Uber me back. Because they said they would Uber me back, I was like, okay, I'm going to have enough hours because Ubering me back would not take up those hours. So I went ahead and agreed to do that. I got back to the office around 7 a.m. with the Uber. On Tuesday, I got a noise ordinance load, Duluth and Dawsonville, then Athens, not the 4 a.m. store. This was, a noise ordinance is Duluth and Dawsonville, then Athens. So it was actually 4 stops. It was very interesting. Duluth and Dawsonville was the noise ordinance. Then there was an Athens, not the 4 a.m., and a Thompson load. Interestingly enough, though, they assigned me, the planner got me confused, and he assigned me a 3rd load to Stone Mountain, then to Niagara. But but they had to drop that because that was supposed to be at like 15 hours into my day is when that would be ready to go because it was a day thing. So you have to abide by the times for the delivery better. And I was like, oh no, I would have violated the crap out of my clock by like 8 hours if I did all that. So they dropped the Stone Mountain Niagara run, which was fine. I arrived at 4:45 p.m. that day, and my load still wasn't ready. And the reason why is because they just got through getting this new system going with stickers and something about pallets and something. I don't have all the details yet, but what I do know is that it slowed the loaders down like crazy. So my load was still not ready. So I sat around waiting. From 4:45, I arrived. I pre-tripped the truck and was ready for my load, but it was not ready until 7. I waited for 2 hours. That was annoying. But on the other hand, they did assign me my favorite truck. So came to find out that my officially issued key, the one that they said, you're going to be issued a key like 2 weeks ago, that key did not work. I tried to use that key on my favorite truck, which is the same key that works for any of the trucks in my my group, and it didn't work. So that was fun. Anyway, so when I finally got out of there, it was like more things against me because the police had closed 317 at Highway 11 for a little bit of construction going underneath 316 where there's that other construction. So I had to go east towards Athens and then basically, turn around and then go back and wait. It was about a half a mile down the road, but the light is so slow and the police that are blocking that intersection did not stop the traffic to let big groups of the 316 people go. They just, and even though there was almost nobody coming from the other side at that time. So it was like, we'll just let the lights do the light thing. And so our light on our side would only let through like 5 vehicles. And then it would go yellow and then red and then it would go green for cars that weren't there. And police, I would hope that they would move way people through, but they weren't. That was annoying. So anyway, it took me 45 minutes to get through that light. It was like a half a mile. And then I arrived to Duluth about 8:45, just before the noise ordinance was actually set to expire. If I arrived after 9, they would not be able to accept me. But I arrived at 8:45 and I banged on the door and they didn't answer it. And so I literally, after like not even 5 minutes, I literally ran into the front door and ran around saying, hey, got your meat and produce. And they were like, oh, okay. And the guy that normally is the Hispanic dude that unloads me, a really nice guy, he had already just said, oh, okay, I guess we're not going to get this. So he had already shrugged and walked away. And they had to pull him back because they said, oh, yeah, radio him and turn him back around. So he arrived back, but it took him 15 minutes to open the gate. And then we had 21 pallets. So that was annoying. It was annoying all over the place. Anyway, it took an hour to unload, and then I went to Dawsonville, and they were fast because it wasn't very much. And we were done in 20 minutes. That was nice. Got back to the DC around 12:20, which normally would have been earlier, but leaving the first location at like 10 p.m. and then getting to Dawsonville, which is, half-hour drive, and getting out of there and getting back over to the DC. That wasn't bad, I guess. Got back at 12:20, and they hadn't even started to load my second trailer. Such a slow night because of the new system that they have in place. And because of that, they swapped me to Cornelia and Seneca, which was awesome. So after 1 hour, see, they hadn't even assigned the trailer for my second load yet. But I sat around and waited for a while, and then they said, after an hour of waiting, they said, "You want to do this one? It's Cornelia and Seneca. Do you have the hours for that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I have the hours as long as I leave now." And they're like, "Here it is," and gave me the paperwork, and I was out of there. It had just popped, and they had just printed it up, and they said, "You want this one?" I said, "Sure." So it's slightly more miles than what I was originally scheduled for, which is great. Anyway, it took me another 15 minutes to find a yard jockey and another 15 minutes to fuel up because there was only one pump working because one of the pumps was down for maintenance. Like somebody had the front of it opened and they were doing work on it or something like that. Not that night. They would work on it by day, but the pump was open. So anyway, finally got out of there around 2 a.m. It was a really sucky night. I did arrive at Cornelia at 3:15 and the guy was fast. I was out of there in 20 minutes. Arrived in Seneca at 4:30 and I was the first in the docks. Nobody else was there. And I was let in immediately, because after 4 a.m. they're looking at the docks. And it took them only a few minutes to assemble and get ready to go. Took nearly an hour to unload and get out of there though, even though they were organized. Finished my day nearly 15 hours after arriving at Martin, mainly because when I was waiting for that load, I didn't log in to do my pre-trip. I sat around. The routine I have now is in case I'm waiting for a load, I would either be saying, okay, well, I'm not going to pre-trip the truck yet. I'm just going to sit here. And then I sit there and wait until it's time for me to start my shift. So if I'm waiting 2 hours and then I'm like, okay, here's my paperwork. Thank you. And then I go and log in and do my pre-trip and take 15 minutes, then do everything else. That just is wasting 15 minutes that I could have already pre-tripped the truck. So I pre-trip the truck. And then once I get my paperwork, I log in as pre-trip. So that way I'm using the time that I'm actually pre-tripping the trailer and fueling up. That's the 15 minutes on the logs of my time. And you may say, well, that's cheating the system. System already has so many things in there that cheat anyway. I can wait until the end of the day and get back that time anyway by either doing a split or by doing a macro 56 and extending my schedule to 16 hours, which I can do once every 2 weeks. No, I'm sorry, once a week. But I have only had to use that one time to not violate my schedule when I was overscheduled. And so the way I look at it is it's a safety net for me. And so if I do it this way, I'm not paid for the time that the clock is just running. So why bother logging in until I'm ready? So that's the way I look at it. Anyway, my first 2 days, I hadn't slept very well. I would go to sleep, I'd wake up, and then I would be like, oh, what's my load? And then I'd look at it and I'm like, okay, well, and then I would be thinking about it or have to call the office about it. So I decided to knock myself out with 2 melatonin, which is only 6 milligrams total, and then a valerian root. And I woke up stiff, but I tell you, I was well rested. My Wednesday started with Duluth and Dunwoody noise ordinance load. Then the same Dunwoody I'd just gone to a couple of days previous, and then to Greenville and Easley. I got my load, and my first load to Duluth and Dunwoody was out of there at 6:20. 11 at 3:16 showed up on my app as still closed and backed up. So I went down 78 and then went down 124 to Sugarloaf and then arrived in Duluth at around 7:45. So it was about an hour. It was about maybe took extra 10 minutes from not going 3:16 straight. But you know what? I'm sure it saved me another 45 minutes like it did before, maybe half an hour total considering the extra drive. Unloading went very fast. I was out of there by 8:25, got to Dunwoody in 20 minutes, and nobody was in the dock, so I had to run around the building, and it took 15 minutes to find the right key to get the door unlocked, and then it took 45 minutes to get me unloaded, which was extremely slow. When I went and got back in the truck to get back to the DC, a screen was up on the Omnitrax upgrading the software. This thing is a dinosaur. This thing it's like, you don't run Windows 95 updates. There are no updates for this thing anymore. This thing is so slow. It's like trying to update Windows 95. What in the world was it upgrading? I have no idea. So anyway, I was like, all right, fine. If you're going to upgrade, I'm not going to sit here and wait for however long it takes you to upgrade because it could be an hour for all I know. I hit the road and I got back to the DC. And then once the thing came back up, I edited my hours and corrected my time that I was driving. Anyway, that was annoying because the system was going so slow. Anyway, as I went in there was a collision between an 18-year-old veteran and an OTR driver in the security line. It wasn't on my side. I was going in. It was as they were leaving. Apparently an 18-year veteran didn't realize there was a guy there, and he starts to move over, and the back of his trailer clipped the guy, and he did not see it for whatever reason. And that was his first accident in 18 years driving. So I felt kind of bad for the guy. Anyway, on my way to Greenville, I got stuck at the railroad tracks at Commerce and was delayed only like 5 to 10 minutes by the train. But anyway, it was one night of delays after another. I arrived in Greenville at 1:30 a.m. and they took their half of the trailer in about 25 minutes. And I was on to Easley, and they were doing a lot of renovations, which is interesting because it cuts way into the truck line, the lane that you can go into the back. So you have to go in literally one way. Otherwise, you can't make a wide enough turn. And if you follow the sign that says truck entrance, you will not make the turn. You have to pull in a different entrance that you have to figure out because the GPS doesn't help you and they don't have signs up. So anyway, so I arrived there 15 minutes into the store lunch, but there were 2 employees in the docks and the lady pulled and the guy ran. So I was out of there and gone by 2:50, which was awesome. Second night in a row where we had this new system in place that was screwing everything up. And now one of the screw ups that is happening with this system is that, the stickers say, give us a number for a pallet, and it also gives us a number for the store. And when we look at the paperwork, it may say 10 pallet positions, but 12 stickers or 12 pallets. And so that means that there are going to be 2 pallets that are stacked on top of other pallets because there's 10 pallet positions, meaning 10 stacks of pallets, and there's 12 total pallets. So it could be, one on top of another. It could be that they're shorter and there could be 2 stacks on top of one. So you just have to look at them, and anytime there's a separate pallet, you have to look for the sticker on that. And that's not a big deal normally. It's a parent-child. On the old paperwork we had until a couple of months ago, about 3 or 4 months ago, whenever that was, we used to have the numbers for the child pallets. We don't have them anymore. So we just have to keep an eye out. And usually it's the produce, it's not the meat that has the stacks. So it's like watermelons stacked on top of watermelons or something like that. Or flowers stacked up on top of something else. So we just have to pay attention to it. And but with the new system, the stickers are all over the place. Normally they're sequential, like it'll be pallet number 117, and then the child will be 118, and then another pallet would be 119, and then 120, and then 121, and it would go something like that. Or it'd be like the same thing, but it would be like 872, and then 873, 874, 875, something like that in sequential order. Since the new system went into place, they're all over the place. It'd be like 118 next to 470, next to 612. And then it would be like, 948. And then you'd be back down to 001. And then it's like, these are all over the place. And not just that, the store number will match the store number, but there'll be extra stickers there. So for the first few days, there was not one place I went to that didn't have extra stickers. And at first I was starting to wonder if I had counted correctly, or was I giving them additional pallets from other stores? No. All the stores on the pallets were accurate. But a location was like, I'm supposed to have 9 pallets why do I have 14 stickers here? I'm like, because the computers are being computers and they're new. So anyway, though, that's what was going on there. Had a fun little thing that happened on the way to Easley. I'll tell you about real quick. Driving down the road, I kept seeing pull off to the right to go over the railroad tracks. Pull off on the right, continue down the road, pull off on the right, more railroad tracks. And then the pull off to go to Easley. I'm driving down the road, make the right turn. And as soon as I make the right turn, I hear a train. And instantly I'm like, looking for the train. Where's the train? Where's the train? And I don't see railroad tracks. I'm like, holy crap, am I on them? Then it suddenly hits me. There was that I had gone slightly up a hill, and I was up a hill, and this was a bridge. So it took me just a split second to realize all this. But as soon as I heard the train honk, I was like, blow. I was like, where is the train? And then I realized as I'm on this bridge, I look down and I see the train going underneath. I'm like, geez, anyway, that was kind of funny, bridge scare, but whatever. So Thursday, I'd slept so well Wednesday when I knocked myself out. I knocked myself out again. Another 2 melatonin, 3 milligrams. So for a total of 6 melatonin or grams of melatonin, not bad. And I woke up about every 2 hours and then rolled over and went back to sleep. Not a big deal. I was assigned Duluth and Lawrenceville first, and then 3 Augusta area stores, including a 4 a.m., which is that god-awful, and the god-awful Deansbridge Road location, which I can't stand that load. So one of the location rather. It's one of the worst locations I've ever been to. So anyway, I called the office and left a message for the planner asking him to switch me because I would arrive very early, and I might even run out, because if I arrived at that 4 a.m. store, if I started early enough for the noise ordinance load and then was there in Augusta too late after 4, if it took them till like 5 to unload me, for example, because it's a neighborhood market, it's in a not great area. If it took them over an hour to get me unloaded and then I hit the road, I might violate my clock by the time I got back from Augusta. So I said, if you can swap me, I would prefer that, because that way I'm not going to violate my clock. And I left a voicemail message because the planner was away at lunch at 2:45 in the afternoon when he leaves at 4. I don't get it, but whatever. So, but he did change me. So he got the message. I was like, okay, that's good. Because I didn't leave a voicemail message. I left a message with a person in the office who told him or sent him a message. And anyway, my second assignment changed to Taylor's, Greer, and Greenville. Because after I did the Duluth and Lawrenceville runs, it was, it would have been that crazy, thing. So anyway, that my second load had changed. I arrived at DC around 5:15 and was ready to start my day. And I was just barely after 6, and 11 and 316 was still jammed up. And you can tell on the app, if you go to Google Maps, you can zoom in and look at that intersection. And if you see it's red feeding in on the sides, it's because it's still closed in the middle. So it's basically backed up for like another half a mile. So I realized this and was like, all right, well, I'm not going to do that. So I decided I was going to go down 78 again. Now, the GPS, just like the day before that I was going down 78, it routed me onto back roads. Now, I have never driven these back roads in a CMB. So I was like, I'll give it a shot. I go driving down this one road, and I tell you, once I got a couple of miles down the road, I started seeing no truck roads. First, they were for the side roads, pull off on the left or the right. Those are where they were supposed to be. But then they started showing up on some of the roads I'm supposed to take. The GPS is routing me onto. And then I was like, I can't go that way, so I'm going to continue straight. Well, that's when it started getting kind of fun. The GPS kept, I kept listening to it and it kept rerouting me. And this happened numerous times with no place to turn around. Cause at this point I was like, I think I might need to turn around. I might get myself in trouble, but it's a 2-lane road. And there's no place to turn around. You can't U-turn on, it's company policy also, but you also can't turn around on a 2-lane road. I need to have a parking lot or someplace, and I cannot turn around. Finally, I had no choice but to drive onto a no truck route, but it looked like it wasn't very long. And I did, and was not caught, which was good. It was only about a quarter to a half a mile. And then I turned back onto a truck route. And then it listed and said, luckily I didn't get stuck, but then I see this sign right as it pulls, right as I make my turn onto a road that's not a no truck route. I start going down about a quarter of a mile, and then it throws up the no truck route sign, and it says 3-ton weight limit on a bridge in 3 miles. I'm like, great. So I have a choice. I can stop here and back up a quarter of a mile down the road, which isn't going to happen, not at rush hour time, or I can continue down the road and see what happens. So I continue down the road to see what happens. GPS is routing me this way. I was then, it turned into a no truck route after about 1.5 miles to 2 miles. And I am looking for a turnoff. And like, please, for the love of God, I don't want to end up getting in trouble and having to be towed out of here somehow, because I can't back up 2.5 miles down this road. But anyway, at the 2.9 mile mark, it ran into 316. And I was like, thank you, Lord Jesus. So anyway, I pull off of 316. And if I were to continue straight, that was a no truck route with the 3-ton bridge, which it said no truck route. And I was like, okay, good. So got lucky there. Word to the wise, don't trust the stupid GPS. I'm just going to stick to the majors that I know, because that area is one that I'm not going to chance again, because that was nerve wracking. I wasn't listening to anything. I was just driving down the road, bug eyed, like, nervous. Anyway, so I arrived at Duluth at 7:10. And they told me a frozen and dairy truck was supposed to be arriving in 25 minutes. And I'm like, guys, look, I says, I'm going to go as fast as y'all go. And there were 2 guys that were there, and they were like, all right, let's wrangle in some other guys to run for us, and we're both going to pull. So they both pulled. And normally it would take 45 to 60 minutes at this location, but they had me unloaded in 25. It was so awesome, because it was like they were tag teaming. This guy would pull out, another guy would pull out, and they were tag teaming it. And I could barely stay on top of the stickers. I was going as fast as I could. I was faster than them, but only just. Anyway, 2 guys pulled, and that double pulls was awesome. Then I was on to Lawrenceville. I arrived just after 8 p.m. and it took me a few minutes to be let in and get going. It took 45 minutes to unload, and then I was on to the DC for my second load. So many redundant stickers, I tell you. Just constantly same store number, but these extra stickers. And it's like, well, I'm only supposed to have 12 pallets. Why do I have 17 stickers? Yes, it's what we've been dealing with this week. So anyway, right before I left Lawrenceville, though, I was called and asked if I would take a frozen dairy that was about to be late. I said, how long is it? And they said, well, you would have a choice. You could either do Madison and Covington, or you could do Buford and Gainesville. And I knew that Buford and Gainesville meant I was going to be driving through Highway 11 at 316, and that would take 45 minutes to an hour. So I was like, Madison, there is a road, the back road that goes to Madison that's a little faster than going through Monroe, but that road has been closed because the bridge is being, rebuilt or touched up or something like that. So that road is closed. Can't go through there. So you have to go through Monroe. I was like, okay, I have a chance of getting to Monroe and Covington if you assign me that. But I said, if there's anyone else that would take it, I was like, look, I'm just getting back into weekends. And my second load, my first load was a noise ordinance, so it was only like 90 miles. My second load, you're wanting to give me like 75, 80 miles as a second load. And I really would rather have that 255-mile road or run, because that's where I'm going to make my money. You know, it's also night pay. And they're like, we'll see what we can do. They ended up having to say, yeah, we're going to have to assign you that. So which one did you want? I said, Madison and Covington. So they gave it to me. I wasn't happy about it, but I did it. Now, once I finished my workflow, the office finished my workflow for me because they knew that I was going to be really fast. They told me the trailer number. So when I got back, I dropped the trailer, did my inspection, did the macro for the inspection. I went and picked up my other trailer, started to fuel up. And then as I was fueling, I ran inside and got my paperwork. I told them, I called them and said, make sure you have the paper ready to go. So the second I run in there, you can just hand it to me. And they said, okay. I said, I'll have a fighting chance. I also told them I'm going to be ignoring the OmniTrax until I get the workflow done and I get to Covington. Because the way it works, if you're a noise ordinance, you have to log in before a certain time. If you are doing a frozen dairy, it's got to be logged in before midnight. So you have to go in on the OmniTrax and select I've arrived on the GPS, and then you have to enter the screen that has the drop off information. And when you do that, it gives you the choice of starting your clock right then. And so I had to be in that screen before midnight. And by the time I got out of the office, it was like barely after 10. And I'm like, so it was right around 10. So anyway, the office luckily finished my workflow for me from the previous job. And I told them I was going to be ignoring OmniTrax until I made it to Covington. And they were like, fine, whatever you need to do. Because if you have to stop there, the thing is so slow. Every time you press a button, it takes 1 to 10 seconds. And so you press a button and then until you didn't take, do it again. Now it took. And you have to do this. Frozen dairy also means you have to go into a separate screen to get to the minus sign to set the temperature. So you have to do that. Then you have to go back to the number screen to put in the number. Then you have to click the next line. Then you have to go into the special screen to get to the minus sign. Then you have to go out of this special screen. Anyway, it takes forever. So what I did is basically just dropped off my trailer, picked up the other one, refueled, grabbed my paperwork, and I was out in like record time. Right as it started to rain too, no less. So I was driving through I was driving through Monroe, got to the interstate, arrived in Madison at 10:48. And when I got in there, I asked if they could do anything to expedite me. I'd really appreciate it. They were very well stocked. They had people all over the place, bunch of teenage boys. And so I was like, and then there were some guys in their 20s also. I was like, anything you can do to speed this up, I'd really appreciate it. So they were like, okay. So I opened up the trailer and they pulled off the first two trailers or the first two pallets. And wouldn't you know it, right behind that, there was a juice pallet that apparently had a collapse on one side. So the top just shifted over. I was not happy about that. I'm like, well, that's what screwed me. That's going to be what screwed me up for this night. Ends up being, I was saved because these were, like I said, a bunch of like teenage boys and like in their early 20s. So they were like, you know what? I think we might be able to get it off the truck, the trailer. So they had one guy put his shoulder into the lean, and then another guy pushed his hands up on there. So they lifted up one side. You can go in and pick up the pallet, even, or you can pick it up on one side, and when you do this and you just pick up one side, the whole pallet will shift. So you can pick up one side of it and it will lean this way, and then they pull it out and by just grabbing one side. That's what they did. And then as soon as this one guy was able to take his hand and shift around there, he put his shoulder into it. They pulled off the entire pallet and leaned it against a pallet of water that was out just beyond the dock leveler. And they leaned it, and they had like two or three of these guys, putting shoulders into it. And it was about a foot shifted. So it was enough to collapse, but it had wrap around it. So they were basically just stabilizing it. And I was like, that is so awesome. And then they put 2 guys unstacking that while this one guy pulled. Now, the only thing is he pulled the meat all the way to the back himself. Then he started pulling all the produce individually all the way back to it. And I'm like freaking out. I'm like, come on. Anyway, they saved the whole pallet from collapsing and that kind of thing. So I was grateful about that. But anyway, we got the last pallet pulled off and, replaced the 2 that they'd pulled off to get to the last bit that was in the next zone. And I had got out of there by about 11:25. It was a 21-mile drive from Madison, just on the interstate, not to mention the 1.5-mile back road getting to the interstate and then the 1 mile off. So anyway, by the time it was all said and done, I arrived in Covington at 11:55. I had engaged and said arrived in the GPS. And then I hit the OmniTrack screen and it said 11:55 in the login screen. So I was so happy. At that point, I was like, okay, now I can finally rest. I went inside. There was the guy that was, and they didn't open up the door. So I had to run around the building and then go in the front. And they said, yeah, the guy you need, he's like 6.5 feet tall. He'll be the guy that unloads you. He's at break right now. I was like, you know what? That's fine. So I called the office and said, all right. Because when I picked up this trailer, they offered to drop the backhaul off of it. And I said, okay, let me ask you this. If you were to drop the backhaul off of this, since it's now just after midnight, if I come back in there, can you give me a third load? Because I was going to try to make up those hours. And they're like, no, we don't really, we have a lot of the loads that still aren't loaded because they're still going slow because of the new system. And we really don't have a load for you. We have a bunch of drivers waiting for loads. So we can't give you a third because some drivers are still waiting on their first. I'm like, okay, fine. So keep the backhaul on there. So anyway, once he got me unloaded, he was very organized and had a runner. So that was that. I was out of there in 35 minutes. But anyway, I went ahead and hit the road to go to U.S. Cold Storage in McDonough. I arrived there at 1:45 a.m. and was told they didn't have a Walmart trailer, so I was going to be live loaded. And I said, do you happen to know how long this is going to take? He said, well, the side of the building you're going to is fast. The other side isn't fast. You're going to the fast side. I said, okay, great. This isn't my night though. Just remember that. So, it took them, after I pulled into the dock space, dock 38, I backed in there. I was waiting for my load. And, there's a light at the loading dock and it stays green until they hook up to it. And a guy came out and basically broke my airline. He took off the airlines. That way I couldn't drive away. And, it took 90 minutes for him to come out there and do that. So I was like, anyway, so I was waiting a total of over 4 hours because they just were not going fast. I don't care what anybody says. They weren't going fast. And I realized I was at less than 2 hours on my 14-hour clock. So I called the office and let them aware of the situation. And they said, you know what? You've been there for over 4 hours. Get out of there. Just drop the trailer and come on back. I said, no problem there. So, so I was very, very happy about that. Anyway, got back to the house. It was a long day. And so I was tired. I went to bed and I woke up and I always keep my phone on 24-hour time, military time. And in my brain, waking up, looking at the clock, I said, oh, it's got to be, I looked at it and I said, oh, look at this. It says it's, 14 something. It was like 14:02 or something like that. And I was like, and I looked at it and I said, oh, cool. 4:02. Awesome. So I start to get ready thinking I'm going to go in a little bit early. And after I get ready and everything, get ready to go out the door, I look at the clock and I'm like, 2:15. What is that? So I look at another one. I'm like, 2:15. Then I realized what the mistake was I made. So I was unable to get back to sleep at that point. Anyway, this was my Friday. So I was assigned Duluth to Lawrenceville, then a 244-mile run to South Carolina. Got to the office just as they were changing me to a 255-mile second run to the North Georgia mountains. I was so happy. Anyway, got into the office and found that my trailer hadn't even been assigned yet. So that first noise ordinance, the Duluth Lawrenceville, had not even been assigned a trailer yet. So the planner was there. He says, "Oh, okay. If he's here for his load, let me see what I got." And then he reassigned me. So I lost both of those. I was hoping they would keep the second one, but no. So I was reassigned 3 Augusta area stores, and then the horrible Snellville, Walmart, and Lawrenceville. The first Augusta stop was off of exit 2 on 520, and it had a lively group. It was a neighborhood market. The guys were all there, and they were chatting and laughing and joking around and distracted. They were talking to each other. I tell you, at one point, there was a guy there that was in his 20s who says to this younger guy, "How can you be faithful to one woman?" And he said, "Because you have discipline." He said, "Man, I just can't do it. I don't understand how men can do that. And can you explain it to me?" And then like in the middle of the unload process, he literally stopped for 7 minutes. And I'm looking at the guy, just staring at him with my arms folded, not glaring at him, but I'm just like, and he was just whatever. Then he gets on the phone, and at one point he disappears for 15 minutes. I have no idea where he is. And there's another guy who I saw was frozen dairy. I'm like, "Can you help me out?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's only my second day, but yeah." So I started to tell him how he can position to shift around and move things around. So anyway, I got out of there in 50 minutes. This guy it was green, didn't seem to know legit. But anyway, very, very slow unload, mainly due to the chatter of this guy. I got to the second location, and it was also 50-minute unload. Because the guy that was wrangling, basically, they didn't open this is the Bobby Brown location. They did not open the door. So I had to run around the building. Then it was like, "Oh, I don't know where the guy is." So it took him forever to get that done. Now, this is the place that when you run around, it's a half a mile. So I was pretty tired by the time I got around. Then they had barricaded that block up with all the food that they were sorting. So they had to clear it all back to open up the dock for them to unload me. Anyway, it was 50 minutes total by the time I was there. And then I arrived in Evans at 9:40, and it took them only a few minutes to let me in. And the maintenance guy who I've seen in the past and have a good conversation with, and he's really on the ball. He actually came in 2 hours early that day, so he was able to unload me. He's like, "You're lucky I'm here early." I'm like, "Yeah, I am." Anyway, he unloaded me. He was very fast and streamlined. I got back to the DC at 12:20. Now, I waited. I had waited there for an hour and a half, waiting for a load. Nothing. It's been so much waiting this week because of the stupid new system and because they're so slow. Finally, the office said, "We have a truck that needs to go in for maintenance. Would you be willing to take it to Tucker?" I said, "Sure." "And then can you drive one and bring it back?" I said, "Yeah, as long as I leave now." So they sent me to Tucker. I got there. I dropped off the truck after finding. They gave me 2 trucks to pull back. He says, because sometimes what happens is you'll have a truck and then you'll have another one blocking it in. So you'll have to knock on the window and ask the guy to move it, or you'll have to see if you can get a key to move it. So they were hoping that by giving me keys that I would have the key to move the truck, a truck that was maybe blocking it. So I got there. Both of the trucks I was there to pick up were behind other trucks. Unfortunately, they only gave me Kenworth keys. So one of them was a Freightliner and the other one was a Peterbilt. Those are rare. Normally they're all KW. So it's like, great. So being that I was like, which one can I get back? So I looked at it and I said, there was the truck I needed with one blocking it. And then there was another truck right to the right of it. And then another one there. So, and then they had, the other one had trucks that were positioned blocking it also. So what I did is I looked at the numbers and I realized that I can move 2 of the trucks side next to the one that I needed to get. I can move those 2 trucks, and then I can basically go back as much as I could and then go around. So I ended up doing that and got that truck out of there, pre-tripped it, got it all the way out, and got it back to the DC after fueling it up because the thing was running low. And also, normally what happens is when it's my Friday is I will fuel up on my way back from the last stop. And since I only had the first stop and they did not reassign me, I was going to lose all those points with my pilot. So, and you're supposed to fuel up. Even though it's a new policy, they're supposed to check the fuel and check to make sure you're leaving the truck in a clean condition. I haven't done either one of those yet. They have not come out and checked mine. I don't know if it's just because I'm night shift or because they trust me or whatever, but I don't know. But what I do know is I got back to the DC and I was done. So that was good. Anyway, that was my week. So we're getting back into nights now, or weekends, and we'll see what my next load is. So there you go. Thanks for watching.